A badge of honor. Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today, and the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We are powered by the OBBM network on all your favorite streaming platforms. Yeah, check us out. Give us a like, give us a share, because what we bring is some value information to all our first responders out there and those who are battling. Sam, we just wrapped up a great weekend with Ashling Equine Therapy. And I tell you, you never get enough. One time is never enough, because I found that it rejuvenated me in so many different ways. It brought my stress levels down. And we were just giving the workshop. We weren't even part of the class. We were just doing, and just watching them work together really helped out a lot.
Yeah, it was great to partner in that way with one of our wonderful partners. If you visit our website at badgeofhonor.org, click on Ashling Equine Therapy. They're right here. I'll say kind of in my backyard, but in East Texas, and
very easy to get to.
Yeah, I like to say we were like the lecture part, and then we worked with the horses, and the chance to heal. See the healing and the awareness with our first responders, and it just how it dropped into their bodies. And we had sheriff's deputies, we had undercover officers, we had dispatchers, and then we have patrol officers, all ranks from all different departments across the DFW and beyond, including an officer who drove 6 hours, not going to mention her department, to be there with us. And it really is the power of healing. But more than that, what you and I were talking about, that goes along with all of our workshops, is the power of understanding. Putting that piece, that awareness piece, and being like, oh, that's what I'm doing, or, oh, that's why this kind of stress happens, or, oh, this is why, my spouse doesn't want to talk to me, right?
Yeah.
We joke about it. Everything's light, nobody leaves, heavy, but it's great.
What got me, and I got to give a big shout out to John Edmondson, our counselor, practitioner who joins us and is part of our team. He has such a way of just opening up that door into the minds of these first responders, because as you've seen it, and I know you looked around as he was giving his opening, because he makes everybody feel so comfortable and so inviting. Mm-hmm. There were correction officers there, and there were 20-year veterans there that things were weighing on their mind, and they opened up in the group, and it was just embracing. And John has that way about him that he just makes you feel so comfortable that you would tell him where Jimmy Hoffa was buried if you knew, because he really does have that way. He just kind of brings that. All right, I'll tell you, John. And it's such a family atmosphere when we have these workshops, and being out in the wilderness really brought it all together. Paige was amazing. She is wonderful in what she does. Learned so much. So and anybody who is battling,
kudos to the horses.
Yeah,
it's all about the horses volunteering their time, because as we saw, if they don't want to take part of it, they're out.
Yeah, that Mustang he was like,
right. Well, and that was the learning part, right? That was the awareness part of how we were coming to the horses, because the horses are not dogs. Even though we're like, come here,
Well,
big puppy. No,
you
no.
brought up a good thing, because I'm glad Paige brought that out.
Right.
There's a big difference between therapy dogs and equine therapy. The horses are not like therapy dogs by no means. And you take one of her classes, you go to one of her workshops, man, you will learn there's a huge difference. And some people are, they get the misconception about therapy animals. And these are way, way different.
Well, it's like your shirt says, and one of our mottos is "You are not alone." That's certainly how we all felt together, and that's what the sharing piece and that group is, became very tight knit, because they had to do lots of group stuff together, move the horses, and just hope they all stay in touch, as we will with them. And as we continue to build awareness of what kind of therapy works for us, what kind of healing works for us, whether it's traditional couch or being in nature, awareness of all things. We are going into a very interesting time, not only in our state, in the U.S., but also in the world. And if your eyes are not open, a lot of things are going to go by that actually affect everything about your daily life. And our guest tonight, she has had an opportunity, first of all, to see the ugliest of ugly as it relates to her work, exposing the evil in child sex trafficking and beyond. And so we want to welcome Detective Heidi Chance to A Badge of Honor podcast. Heidi, welcome.
Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You bet. Well, tell everybody watching and listening on their favorite podcast app about your background.
Yeah, so my name's Heidi Chance, and I retired from Major City Police Department. It was actually Phoenix Police Department, which is the 5th largest city in the United States, actually, if you've been to Phoenix. It's not an amazing downtown area. It's kind of underwhelming, but we're really huge in the way that we are not landlocked. And so if you've ever been to Phoenix, it just keeps going and going and going. But I spent 25 years with Phoenix Police Department, 23 years sworn. So I joke and I say I started when I was 12, because hopefully I
know you don't look like you could be 25 years on the force.
Yeah. But I did, I started with the police department at 18 years old as a cadet trainee, which was a new program. My dad is retired Phoenix PD as well. So he actually gave me his badge that had the chief give it to me when I graduated the academy in 99. And so I spent 23 years sworn, and I retired in October of 21 and went on to another law enforcement agency. But during my time at Phoenix Police Department, I investigated human trafficking for almost 14 years, and I worked as a female undercover, posing as a prostitute thousands of times, having thousands of sex buyers solicit sex from me, both on the streets and in hotels. And then I also had traffickers try and recruit and groom me, both in person, out on the street, as well as on social media, which is something else I hope we talk about.
Yes.
Absolutely.
One thing I just want to, you said human trafficking, and I'm glad you brought that up, because everybody looks at trafficking as just sexual trafficking. Human trafficking for labor is just as prevalent as sexual trafficking, correct? So there's two distinctions there, correct?
Yeah. People get human trafficking and human smuggling confused. So human trafficking is a crime against a person, and that is done by either forced sex or forced labor, as you mentioned, whereas human smuggling is a crime against the border or the state. And so what my experience comes from mostly is sex trafficking. However, we did have a couple of labor trafficking incidents during that time. The thing with labor trafficking is most people who are being trafficked in that way don't realize that they're being trafficked, so they're not coming forward, and they don't know that they can, report that happening to them. And they also don't see themselves as victims. They're making more money here in this country than they are in their country back home. And so they don't want to be deported. There's all kinds of circumstances as to why we don't hear about labor trafficking as much.
much, right?
Most of my experience is sex trafficking.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, John, it goes back, we think about when Heidi, you explain your experience and how you went undercover, everybody has the flashback to the movies, with the pimps and the girls on the street, turning tricks. There's a lot of myths and a lot of things we miss because we think it's like it is in the movies. And unless you're watching a documentary of real life, it really isn't. And when we come back from our first break, I want to bust through some of those myths so that, unfortunately, it's happening in every major city. So if these are open, you can help out as just Joe or Joan citizen. We'll be right back after our first break to dispel those myths. Stay tuned, everybody.
Move freely, America, without medical restrictions or penalty. Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Move freely, America, with one voice, without fear of retribution, achieving a common goal, medical freedom. We the people make our voices heard by connecting with state legislators and engaging a constitutionally compliant medical Bill of Rights for all citizens. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Move Freely America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move Freely America. My voice.
And my voice.
And together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with retired detective Heidi Chance. 25 years in law enforcement, a lot in the undercover aspect of it, with sex trafficking, which is very prevalent nowadays. We're hearing it all over the news. And one of the myths that we want to bust that I've learned is that, every parent out there thinks that the big white van with the free candy is going to drive down the block and snatch up your kid. That's not the truth so much anymore now with the internet. Kids are being groomed out of our homes. They're being taken right out of their bedrooms in the middle of the night without you even knowing it. And that's why it's so important to monitor our children. We want to give them their space, but it is such a dangerous world. And Heidi brings the true life insight on how dangerous it really is. So thank you, Heidi.
Yeah. So part of being an undercover and doing proactive operations, trying to target sex buyers and traffickers, was our aspect in social media. So I have 7 Facebooks, 4 Instagrams, Tag, Meet Me, Bumble, Plenty of Fish, Snapchat. I just opened up a Discord, all in undercover personas. There's a lot of people going on in here. But basically,
I can't even keep track of my Facebook stuff.
I know. That's with the intent to have a trafficker to recruit and groom me instead of a live person. And so we've been very successful catfishing traffickers and having them have a conversation where we establish the elements of a crime, such as pandering. And then we've actually extradited traffickers all the way from Orlando, Florida, back to Arizona, and obviously from the West Coast back to Arizona. And I have had them go to court, see a judge, and take a plea offer, and they've never seen my face. And so now they have a felony conviction on their record with a felony prior in case they mess up again. And, we're getting really good reactions from, obviously the citizens out there with us targeting traffickers in that way so that we're not having live victims go through anything as far as the recruitment and grooming.
Wow.
Now, you 25 years, so you were back in the AOL days, when the internet was just first coming out, and there was trafficking then. There was trafficking then. These dark, sick people found ways to grab kids off and groom them and pander. You said pandering?
Yes.
What is that, like grooming?
Pandering is encouraging a person to lead a life of prostitution. So with the intent of recruiting and grooming for them to work as your prostitute for you.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think another myth is that this only happens to young girls. You know, we have a lot of the Amber Alerts, and I know you were involved in a lot of education around Amber Alerts and what should go into that. And most of them, the majority of them, come across as young girls, but there's young boys involved in this, and it is big money.
Yep.
Yeah, so most of our experience does come from females because they come forward more often than males, but we do have definitely victims that are male victims that have come forward. As far as the Amber Alert training, I do travel around speaking for the National Criminal Justice Training Center of Fox Valley Technical College Amber Alert program. That's my other job. And I've been presenting for them for since about 2014. And they've sent me all over the United States, and I just recently went out of the country, so I'm now an international presenter. I went into Mexico to speak at a conference in Mexico with translators and everything. It was really cool. But most of what that is obviously the tie of missing juveniles to sex trafficking, and how traffickers target runaway juveniles because they think no one's looking for them, no one cares about them. They're out on the streets, they're easily obtainable. When we're talking about these traffickers, we're talking about traffickers that have no normal job. Their job all day long is to manage the victims they have right now and to look for new ones. So when I'm talking about these social media undercover profiles, when I have done warrants for my conversation with a trafficker, I have seen evidence of copying and pasting the message that was sent to me to hundreds of other profiles, all in attempts all over the United States, all in attempts to recruit and groom off of these social media platforms and these apps. So that is definitely the white van. That is what we're seeing today.
So it's almost like a fishing expedition. They just throw out the hook and see what they catch, correct?
100%.
Now, being so close, I work a lot with the Navajo Nation, and I've been out there for the last couple of years doing the MMRW. And we find
let's explain, John, let's explain what that is. Yeah, because people are like, MMRW, what's that?
It's the missing, murdered, Indigenous women and children that are taken off the reservation. Because Heidi, you brought up a great point with some of the traffickers think runaways aren't cared about. You look at the Navajo Nation; they think they can grab these women and children off the Navajo Nation, and no one's going to look for them. They are, and no one's going to look for them once they get them off the reservation, because there is no Amber Alert. They have a I think it's called a teal alert, but there's no Amber Alert within that nation. So there is right here, right on the Navajo, right in your border, there is so much trafficking going on, and they bring them here to Dallas, and then they farm them out all over the place. Well, actually Houston, and they bring them all up and they farm them out.
Yeah,
so
we're seeing that too.
Yeah, so there is the undercover work that you did. Let's move from the social media aspect. Well, actually, before we do that, what would you say? Kids of all ages, it's younger and younger on social media. How can, since you're an educator, how can we as parents, without, I want to say without being intrusive, but you have to be. It's a protection thing, okay? Your kid's a minor, they're a minor child in your house. You own the phone that you gave them. So how do we monitor them, and what are we looking for?
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, when I first started investigating this crime in 2006, 2007, the national average age of entry into sex trafficking was 15. It is now 13 years old, and in my opinion and experience, it's inching closer and closer to 12, 11 years old, which means that parents need to start having the conversations even earlier than you would think, 8, 9, 10 years old. And those conversations have to be specific to the social media platforms, that if we're going to provide them a phone, we need to educate them about what goes on the phone, what goes on the games, what goes on these social media apps. And we need to monitor these apps. It's the job of a parent nowadays to monitor what's going on online and on these apps. And when I talk about the conversations, those conversations need to include a tricky person, which is what we're renaming stranger. Okay, tricky person online will ask you to hide things from your parent. We'll ask you to delete messages. We'll ask you to go to another platform like Snapchat so they can video chat with you, and they know that those conversations disappear. They will ask you to speak in emojis or in some kind of code. Those kind of things, if you're talking to your child about those things happening, when it starts happening, they're going to anticipate that happening. They're going to be able to self-police themselves. And if you've told them openly, you can come to me, you're not going to get in trouble if you have these things going on. I always want you to have open communication with me, your parent. They're going to come tell you about it, and then you can take action on that. And that is what the most important thing is, because we can do all we can to try and lock them down, but they can, kids are resourceful. My sister told me I could share this story, but my niece, when she was 12 years old, my sister had parental controls on her phone, and she thought she had it locked down and good to go. And my 12-year-old niece found a way to bypass those parental controls, created a secret Instagram, and she had men messaging her asking for nude photos. So obviously, we needed to have conversations with her about how dangerous that is, that nothing you post on the internet ever goes away. It can't be taken down. Photos are really, really not able to be taken down. Even though the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has the Take It Down program, we don't know who screenshotted and shared in a different way that photo. So really just educating them about the dangers of those things is really what's most important.
Wow, Heidi, that's amazing. When we come back from our next break, want you to share as much as you can about the case, because you are really good at your job, and there's the largest sentence in terms of number of years in prison that I've ever heard of. Yes. So we will come right back with that when we return. Stay tuned, everybody.
Interested in starting a podcast or TV show? Worried about what you'll say and how to keep it engaging? Think you'd like to be a guest on podcast, radio, or TV shows? Hi, I'm Susan Hamilton, owner and founder of OBBM Network, and I would like to invite you to an OBBM media training to get the tools you need for a relaxed and polished performance you'll be proud to share. Our specialized training techniques include role play, voice training, and everything you need to deliver a confident, clear, and engaging interaction. Go to offbeatbusiness.com. Go to the calendar and register for a training that's convenient for you. Dates available now, 214-714-0495.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with retired detective Heidi Chance, who is undercover doing sex trafficking. And she's educating us and our audience on the dangers that we all face each and every day. Now my dog's going to go barking because my door just rang. But you mentioned something about the apps, right? And you gave us a slew of apps that you were on. And I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, these gaming apps are just as dangerous as the regular social media apps. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think a resource for parents, there are a couple of websites out there. I have two that I refer to often as I educate myself on these apps, because there's new apps every day. Bark Technologies and Gab, G-A-B-B, Gab Wireless. They both have not only devices where you can put parental controls on, and it'll notify parents when there's an inappropriate image being requested or inappropriate language or conversation going on, but also they have a blog, and both of them have blog articles, and they talk about the new apps that come out, and at least Bark Technologies rates how dangerous it is and how easy it is for a predator to pose as a peer on these apps and engage with your child. So the job of a parent is to keep yourself educated on all these new apps, and those two companies do a really good job of keeping us all aware and informed.
And you said that's Bark Technologies, as in like the dogs were just barking, and then Gab with two B's.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Heidi, do the schools teach this? Or I mean, I know you go and you do your workshops, but does schools bring this awareness to the children as well, or no?
I'm sure that there are programs and some education in some schools, but we can't bank on the fact that it's their responsibility. It's someone else. Right. It's the teacher.
No. I agree. It's not their responsibility.
my whole take on it is not to depend on someone else, and that it should be the job of a parent to educate themselves so that they can have these conversations and educate their child. Because by the time I meet you, the parent, and your child, the thing has already happened. And so I was tired of the thing already happening and it being too late. That's why when I travel around and educate to the community, not only about sex trafficking, but general awareness about all the social media online dangers, I talk about these conversations. And I actually wrote a book about how to have the conversations, because I keep saying you need to have these conversations. And I've actually had parents raise their hand and say, well, how do we have the conversation? I'm like, that's why I wrote the book.
And so what's that book called?
Yes, it's called Talk to Them, and it just came out in May. And it's a really simple read. Like I didn't need to delve into too much. The basics of not only sex trafficking, but some of the other online dangers like sextortion or luring a minor for sex. Some of the other things that are going on, not only sex trafficking, that are all focused on online dangers, because that's really what we're facing nowadays.
You hit sextortion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've seen a lot of articles, and I've seen a lot, because we deal with a lot of post-traumatic stress. So the sextortion thing, where a girl will send a nude photo, and all of a sudden now she's being bullied, and they end up taking their own life because of the media presence or the embarrassment of this. Are you seeing that rise, grow in numbers?
Yeah, and that's just me paying attention to what's going on. I never investigated that, but the fact that I had a platform to educate and I speak about all kinds of crimes associated with our children, I do bring up sextortion because I want parents to know that this is individuals, sometimes in other countries, that are acting like peers, posing. They're working undercover themselves. They're posing as peers with your child on these apps, some of these apps that are endorsed by schools, and they're sneaking into these apps and engaging with your child and then getting them to send an inappropriate image and then extorting money out of them. They say, you have to pay me $5,000 or I'm going to blast this all over the internet and your parents are going to find out. And that's where kids are stressed out. They don't have $5,000. They're 12 years old. And then there's where they're hurting themselves and attempting suicide or committing suicide because they can't deal with that. And it's really awful, and it's something that could be prevented if we could just educate our children not to share images and talk to them about these things happening.
Well, you have made a big difference over the years that you have been working in this industry. Tell us as much as you can about the case, and then this, I'll call it incredibly awesome. For once, we're hearing about a court system that actually did something good. Yeah. And go ahead and tell us about that story.
Yeah, so to answer your earlier question about it's not just young people, it's also adults. Mm-hmm. This case actually had 7 victims, and I use it as an example all the time because in one case, you have a lady in her 40s who was a Department of Corrections officer working at the prison, lost her job, fell into drugs, became a stripper, and met the brothel owner who ended up marrying her, and then she brought her 17-year-old daughter into this situation where he had a brothel literally out of his house where men would come in and the girls would line up and they'd choose which one they wanted to have sex with. In that same case, and this is another myth, that it's only the poor kids or the kids that are in the poorest part of town or the kids that are child welfare kids. In this same case, another adult female, barely an adult, 19 years old, mom's a nurse, dad's a doctor, full ride scholarship to a university in northern Arizona, meets a guy on Craigslist. He wants to take modeling pictures of her. She gets introduced to the brothel owner, and then she becomes a prostitute working out of his house. She had a full ride scholarship. Her life was going, up, up, up. And then all of a sudden, this circumstance of a moment of low self-esteem, and this person was able to swoop in and build her up and then exploit her. That's how that happened for her. And now she's a resident of our women's prison for a couple of years because of her drug problem. But that case, the main victim, who was 13 years old, this is familial trafficking. This was her uncle trafficking his 13-year-old niece. She was living in northern Arizona in a small town, and she ended up getting in some trouble. And so her grandmother, his mom, was convinced by him to let the little girl move down to Phoenix with him, and he ended up having sex with her on a daily basis, as well as trafficking her out of that brothel. When she turned 16, so she was in this situation for several years. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Is that the signal? Stop talking. Time out. Yeah. Your phone's talking to you.
Okay, sorry. That's my sister calling. So anyway, basically, she, on her around 16, almost 17 years old, they were going to go do porn in California. And to do porn in California, you have to test for sexually transmitted diseases. And she popped positive for something. And he said, that's okay. We'll go get your little sister. So on that day, she's 16. Her little sister is still up north, 13 years old, living with her dad and stepmom. And she said, yeah, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And so she called her older sister, who barely believed her, but did believe her enough to call the police. And that's how this whole case came to light. Now, the 13-year-old that was up north, I found that he had made false reports to Child Protective Services trying to get that little girl placed with him prior to this ever even happening with the California trip. But anyway, all of that to be said, he was charged with 105 counts, and he was found guilty on 101. This was a 7-month-long trial. I testified 11 times. The main victim, who was in her 20s by the time this went to trial, testified for 18 days against her uncle. And I told her when we were done with this that she's the bravest person I've ever met, because that's a lot of, lot to go through of years and years of telling your story to all these, a jury of 12, what happened to you. But the end result, after 4 days of deliberation, found him guilty on 101, and he was sentenced to 493.5 years in prison.
Wow.
So you can go home.
Yeah.
Good job.
You brought up the bravery of these the victims, and I can't imagine the testimony that they have to give in court probably gets pretty explicit, because defense attorneys are going to try to rattle somebody, right?
They also have to prove the crime.
Yeah. So I can't imagine the emotional stress just giving the testimony alone. That is courage and bravery at its highest levels.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at one point, she was so upset that she ran out of the courtroom in front of the jury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Man, that is.
Oh, man.
Thank God for people like you out there saving our children.
Absolutely,
you and your whole team, because that's what we need. I mean, we need people to go away for that 400 years plus. These 6-month stints do nothing.
Or sometimes it's just the victim versus the perp, and nothing happens, as we're seeing more and more with our court system. But, when we come back from our next break, Heidi, you want to talk about the website that you created and how people can, have you come out, do your education, grab your book and everything like that. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with retired Detective Heidi Chance. And we're talking sex trafficking and human trafficking, and how to protect our kids, how to get the education across them, how to even speak to our children now on the dangers that are out there, because a lot of parents do not know how to speak to their kids. Some of the kids are just latchkey parents, latchkey parents that they work two jobs that and the kids just, they put them in a room and go on the internet. So Heidi brings this educational purpose an awareness to all these parents that are out there to protect their children. Heidi, I want to touch on one thing that's current, and you could say don't go there, but your case that you had involved 7 victims, and the guy got 429.5 years.
493.5.
493.5 years. Now, the current P. Diddy case that's out there, right, where now we have well over 100 victims, right? And the victims, a lot of people are trying to discount them, saying, well, you did it because of you just wanted to be next to them. That's not an excuse.
Right.
There is trafficking.
It's the exploitation.
It's the exploitation,
of a child.
The coercion, the threats. All of that plays a role in this. So even a young girl who thinks, "Oh, I wasn't trafficked," you could have been and not even known about it. Correct?
Yeah. So just by definition, force, fraud, or coercion. Obviously, the force is some kind of physical injury. It's going to be something visible, scars, bruising, those kind of things. But the fraud, that's kind of what I see that's going on with that case, is maybe this, promise
the allegations
of a better life. Yeah, promise of a better life.
Allegedly, right.
Allegedly. Promises for vacations, promises for trips. These are all things that traffickers do. And then the coercion is the threats. Threats are very real to victims. I always say that a trafficker, a pimp, they're one and the same person, 2 different names for the same person. A pimp is the most reliable person you'll ever meet. If they say they're going to beat you up, they're going to beat you up because they need their victims to believe that what I say is going to happen. Otherwise, these victims wouldn't stay around. And so the threats are very real. So those elements, if they exist in this case, then that would definitely explain why this happened and why these victims didn't come forward.
Wow. Now you created a website that has an entire educational platform. Tell us what the website is and what's on that and how we can find out more.
Yeah, so I created achanceforawareness.com, pun intended on the last name. And basically it is a platform where I have a human trafficking awareness course for anyone in the public to take. I'm also producing a modern day situational awareness course. And I did a live webinar, which I'll probably turn into a take as you want or on-demand type of course for digital literacy for parents, where I'll talk more about, what we've kind of talked about here, but in more in depth as far as the types of dangers that parents need to know about online safety. And then I have my book, like I said, it's called Talk to Them, Navigating Difficult Conversations with Our Youth. And then I do, my other mission, obviously, is the community outreach, because I really believe in the power of awareness. I have witnessed it. We were doing these same cases with the same type of suspects to trafficking juveniles. When I first started, they were getting plea offers for 8, 9, 10 years old. And fast forward to 2015, when that, almost 500-year sentence, and I put a couple of traffickers away for over 100 years. And so that only happens with the power of awareness and people in the public who are our potential jurors understanding that when I testify that this victim is freely walking down the side of the road with a phone in their hand, that they are a victim and they're not free to leave. And to have a jury wrap their head around that is extremely important for me, because I want more outcomes like what I've had, and I want other officers to experience the same successes. And all of that only happens if we have an informed public. So my other mission, though, is law enforcement training, specifically for female undercovers, female officers that want to be an undercover someday. Because I don't know if you've ever worked undercover, but when I worked undercover, it was literally a 20-minute briefing, and then out to the street I went, and I just had to learn on the job in the moment of, and it was very dangerous when you think back on that. And so doing education, I just hosted a female undercover school a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to do another one after the beginning of the year in February, where I do a 3-hour class with any female detectives. Obviously, they have to submit their commission card, their ID, showing that they work for a law enforcement agency. I'm not going to let just anyone in this class. It has to be sworn law enforcement. But I'm going to host that class again. And I had a really good outcome. It just happened to be on a day probably that most newer officers have weekdays off, and I put it on the weekend. So now I'll do it in the evening on a weekday. So in that way, I can reach more of a newer crowd. But in addition to the female undercover school, I also host a patrol recognition and response, because I don't know if you guys had a class, but back in 1998, when I was in the police academy, I didn't have a class on human trafficking. And in Phoenix, we didn't start teaching our officers about human trafficking until 2014. So having patrol recognize when they're on a traffic stop that they might have a pimp pulled over with a couple of victims in the car, who's not worried about, go ahead and search my car, officer, because they're not worried. They're not going to find drugs. You're not going to find stolen property, because they control the mouth of those girls in the car, and they're not going to say anything. So this pimp isn't going to get caught for anything, and they're going to take their ticket and laugh. So I do the patrol recognition, and then I am a forensic interviewer. And so I do a class on interviewing victims, because interviewing a child sex trafficking victim is way different than interviewing a regular sexual abuse or child sexual assault victim. Very different. Those victims come forward. Those victims want to talk about what happened to them. These victims are reluctant. They're streetwise. They speak in terminology and code used in the sex trafficking world. And unless you know about all that, you're not going to be able to relate to them. You're not going to get them to talk to you. And then I do a class on interrogating suspects. And then a class on putting all of this together, because these cases are really hard to prove. We're not going to have a witness that saw someone go have sex with somebody else, a sex buyer, make money, and then turn the money over to the trafficker. And so putting these cases together with corroborative evidence, and more than that, because I've been doing this so long, I've had 4 pimps now that I put in prison, got back out, and went right back to trafficking again. So now I talk about doing financial investigations on these guys alongside a victim-based case. So then that way, if we do have a victim that decides they don't want to press charges, they don't want to play the game of 2 years to go to trial, they bow out, we still have our financial investigation going, and we can still put them in prison. So that is what I've got going on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow. Yeah.
also, I saw a lot on social media, hand signals. A lot of girls that are, or even anybody who's being trafficked, there's certain hand signals that people should be aware of as well if they see them. Are those true, or?
It is. It's at the airport, but what I'm finding is that most victims I've talked to, the victim doesn't even know what the hand signal is, because they're not paying attention to that. So yes, the public might know, but the victim doesn't know. But I would still look for it if you use it. I'm sorry, if they use it. But it is something you put in the that's in the airport on the sign for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Some states, and I don't know if Texas has this, but Arizona just created our own human trafficking hotline, because in my opinion, the National Human Trafficking Hotlines in DC, they are not mandatory reporters. They are a resource for survivors to come out, and they may not want to have law enforcement contact. So they're not going to talk to or notify law enforcement because they're not mandatory reporters. So in Arizona, we created our own hotline where if someone comes forward, it's obviously an encouraged thing that they involve law enforcement to get the traffickers. So number one, they don't traffic other victims. And number two, we can get this victim justice. And it's a hotline that's managed 24/7. And the people on the other end of the line have like the back phone number to all the human trafficking units in the metropolitan area and all over the state. And it gets a quicker response because there is a delay calling DC all the way to your state.
I don't know if Texas has done that. Texas did take a big stand on one of the porn sites. It was Pornhub.
Yes.
They banned it in Texas because of the sexual trafficking that was going on through that porn site. So I know they did take a stand on that. I don't know if they did the human trafficking or the sex trafficking hotline. But
yeah, it sounds like every state would need that, and that would be like call your congressperson and get that done. Hey, we got to take our last break, and then we will be back to talk more with Detective Heidi Chance. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
Rise and vibe with your new elevated morning ritual. Meet Rise by Frequence. Frequency charged nutrition. Rise is formulated with a blend of 7 different organic mushrooms, B vitamins, amino acids, and green coffee bean extract. Rise supports brain health, performance, and focus while enhancing mood, mental clarity, and energy. Enjoy the delicious mango lemonade flavor while giving your mind the nutrients it needs. Get charged up with Rise. Fuel your body and mind today.
All right, it's all about rising and vibing with John and Sam. Hey, why rise nootropics? Well, nootropics are believed to support healthy cognitive function, mental clarity, and overall brain health. Rise is formulated with a blend of 7 different organic mushrooms, B vitamins, amino acids, and 100 milligrams of caffeine from organic green coffee bean extract. Everything comes together, and it's a delicious powder in a mango lemonade citrus flavor. It is a healthy, tasty treat for not only your mind, but also your body. It's 0 sugar, so it's keto friendly, and it supports your mental performance, brain health, energy, mental clarity, creativity, motivation, concentration, alertness, and mood. I use it every day as a pre-workout, and I am in the zone there. Mix it with Source minerals, which gives you all your body all the minerals that it needs on a daily basis. We have a package that we put together for our listeners and those watching. You can go to badgeofhonorhealth.com and you get a discount when you subscribe. That's a badgeofhonorhealth.com. Go get it. Start rising and vibing with me and John, and I promise you'll feel a whole lot better. So back to the show. We got Detective Heidi Chance. She is doing so much work on putting people away for a lot of years. And, you know, just to kind of wrap up, we're hearing a lot, you know, you're in Arizona, we're in Texas, about all this human trafficking coming across the border. You were just in Mexico doing a workshop and speaking there. You know, some of these kids have to end up, you know, getting either with the pimps, or they're creating their own kind of ring of sex traffickers. How prevalent is this?
Well, I think most of my experience comes from inner city trafficking, and maybe I'm the only one to define this, but I find that there's different types of trafficking. There's organized trafficking, where we've got brothels and cartels and even massage parlors. And then we have individualized trafficking, where we have individuals trafficking other individuals. So most of my experience is individuals trafficking other individuals. However, obviously with what's going on now, I don't think we even know the ramifications of what's going to be the outcome of all these children that are displaced here in our country, that don't have anyone, you know, managing them, that are being sponsored in some way. We're not sure who those people are, and so we don't know what their intentions are and whether they're selling them or what they're doing with these kids. So it's definitely the future is out on that. I'm not sure what the outcome's going to be, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a positive one.
No, we know it's nefarious from, you know, some of the arrests that officers around the country have made. And obviously, you know, when we have the victims that do come forward and say this is what happened, we know what's going on. We've got Sean Combs' case that is going to get very interesting quickly, that I think will shed even more light on that and the people involved, because it's not just you know,
it's not the poor people.
It could be your neighbor, but I mean the people taking advantage of these kids and young adults.
Yeah.
It could be your neighbor next door. You know, you know, the porn and the sex industry, it has no bounds. What we need to do is we need to keep our eyes open. If you work in dentistry or a medical field, and you're seeing these young girls and the people bringing them in, kind of, you get a weird vibe or something doesn't match, call the police. Maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's something, right?
Yeah, I have a list of indicators on my website.
Great.
I have listed out, you know, if they have a brand, a tattoo, if they are dressed to attract, if they are not looking at you in the eyes. There's a whole bunch, multiple cell phones, hotel keys, all kinds of indicators where if you put 2 and 2 together and these are all occurring, then the outcome would be to report. And my advice is to report to local law enforcement. If it's happening right now, that would be a call to 911. That's what they're for. Or if your state has a human trafficking hotline, that's where else you could report. But definitely say something, just like in the airport.
I want to give a big shout out. I want to give a big shout out to our Oklahoma, because of the awareness that you provide, and that has law enforcement has started doing with human trafficking. We had a sexual trafficking case here in Dallas that a young lady was taken out of a stadium with her dad. Her dad was in the stands, and this groomer took her right out, and she disappeared for like 60 days. But an Oklahoma officer saw this young girl 2 months later and saw her at a hotel just walking along the top rails, and decided to question her, and found out that she was one of those missing children. So it is so important for our officers to be proactive. Go and ask the questions. Do not just drive by. Go ask. Don't just dismiss them as local prostitutes or drug dealers
or throwaways.
Throwaways. Question these people that you see at these hotels, because I saw the news article afterwards, and this kid is so joyful to be home with her mom, and they did this whole thing, and it was a beautiful reuniting. And who knows where this child would have been now if that officer did not take that proactive approach and go question her. So God bless the Oklahoma PD who saved this child from God knows what.
So I put your website up again, Heidi. It's achanceforawareness.com for those of you listening on your favorite podcast app. Where do you play on social media where people can connect with you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn just under my name, Heidi Chance, or I have a company page, A Chance for Awareness. And then I'm on Instagram, A_chance_for_awareness.
A lot of underscores. What do you want? Like one of the forefathers?
It's all good. You can find her. Yeah.
4 and underscore.
Now they'll remember that.
But Heidi, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your stories and the experience with us, the awareness. Now, if you watch this podcast, the replays will go up. You can learn and like I said, keep your eyes open. Thank you so much for what you do, and keep up the fantastic work.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. Be in touch soon. Wow. Very eye-opening. If you're a parent, go to the website. Again, it's achanceforawareness.com, and look at the resources that Heidi has up there so that you can talk to your kiddo, get her book. We've got to start these conversations, because you heard it here. It's going to go down to like 10 years old kids. So we've got to start talking.
As soon as you give your kid a phone, that's when you should start talking.
Exactly. So we thank her so much. And we'll also post those technologies. I think it was Bark and Gab, of how they're working to alert parents when a not so good picture goes up. So we thank her for that. Hey, you guys saw that the CarryInTexas.com, the commercial that we're running here. I just want to mention, if you're a gun owner, if you like guns, if you like shooting, if you're in the DFW area, we are up at Frisco Gun Club this Sunday, starting at 2 p.m. We are doing a scary movie shoot. This is what I love about the business side, is we do these fun events, and we go out on the range. We're going to be shooting guns that you see from the movies. So we're covering those from The Walking Dead, from Resident Evil, and from Scream. So we'll spend time there. Then we're going to lock the guns up. We'll lock them all up, and then we'll go into the VIP club to enjoy food and libations. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So you can go to Carry in Texas, the Facebook. We're on Facebook, and you can make your reservations right now, because we got to get the food orders in. So if that sounds like something you want to come to, just go on Facebook and go ahead and do that. Hey, we have got our own workshops coming up. We're talking about first responder wellness and resiliency. Go to abadgeofhonor.org. I got a pop-up right there. You can register or hit us up on the events page. You will see that, and all of our events are up there. And to all of our law enforcement out there, all of our first responders, we are praying for you every day. You have warriors out there, prayer warriors, and we want you to know that we're praying for you. So thank you for keeping us safe in our communities. To our veterans, thank you for fighting the good fight that allowed John and I to do a show like this every single week. And to our active duty military, more and more of you are being deployed across the world. Please stay safe. We are praying for you as well. Thank you for keeping our shores safe here in the United States. John, take us home.
Well, this was a powerful show. I want to thank Heidi Chance once again for bringing the awareness and the education aspect and saving these children across the nation. Every parent should share this show with people that you know, because you don't know the life that you can save or the child that you can save. Until next week, peace.
See you next week, everybody.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495 today.